Chapter 151, The Nine Swords Fly Together. This chapter is updated by Novels.pl. While King Chibai was avoiding the iron pieces, Zhang Yuochen attacked and charged towards King Chibai. Dragon Shape and Elephant Shadow. Although the fourth movement of Dragon and Elephant Prajnapam was a low class of spiritual martial technique, it was as powerful as a mid-class spiritual stage martial technique. Zhang Yuochen's body seemed to be divided into two parts, charging at King Chibai from both the left and right. The human shadow on the left struck out Dragon Claw Hand while the right struck out Elephant Palm Print. Oh no! Seeing Zhang Yuochen charging, King Chibai's countenance fell and he had to gather enough genuine chi to make movements hurriedly. All 5 fingers on both hands clenched into fists and released at the same time. Boom! Palms and fists crashed into each other. The technique Zhang Yuochen applied was Dragon and Elephant Prajnapam. Since King Chibai fended off with his hands hastily, he wasn't strong enough to block Zhang Yuochen's palm technique. Under the impact of the mighty palm force, King Chibai spat out a mouthful of blood. His inverted body flew out toward the palace below. Jinfeng Court was more than 80 meters high. If it weren't for being hurt, he could have reached the ground safely by displaying meteoric rise. However, he was not only injured but also unable to apply the body skill at all. Once he fell, he was bound to be seriously injured, or possibly even dead. In order to defeat King Chibai, Zhang Yuochen had been hit by 2 sword pieces and was injured as well. Despite this, he immediately jumped off the top of the palace and wanted to save King Chibai. After all, Zhang Yuochen did not hate King Chibai but instead, saw him as a strong opponent. At the very last minute, Zhang Yuochen grabbed King Chibai's sleeves, slowing down his fall. Shortly after, came a piercing sound. The sleeves were torn. Phhhf. King Chibai fell into the pond, splashing water 6 meters high. Zhang Yuochen fell to the water's surface and stood on a wooden stick. He saw the piece of fabric in his hand, and then he looked out over the water. He had reduced King Chibai's falling force tremendously. Together, with the buffer of the pond water, he should be all right. Not only was Zhang Yuochen nervous, so were the young geniuses. If King Chibai had fallen to his death, it would be a real joke if the word spread out. Certainly, everyone admired Zhang Yuochen too. He had obviously defeated King Chibai, yet even with his injury, he'd saved King Chibai. This breadth of mind was very impressive. Those who had looked down on Zhang before changed their minds in this moment. Suddenly, King Chibai shot up from the water not far from Zhang Yuochen. He was only 3 meters away. "I haven't lost yet," he roared. Phew! In his 2 fingers, there was a piece of dreadfully cold and broken sword. With genuine chi running and fingertips snapping, the broken sword was striking towards Zhang Yuochen. It was the sword tip he had broken before. He'd thrown the sword tip into the pond. Now he picked it up and turned it into a hidden weapon. With such close distance, he could not even dodge it. Zhang Yuochen could only try to avoid letting it hit the vital parts of his body. Pfffff. The 15-centimeter sword tip pierced into Zhang Yuochen's chest. Blood gushed out from his body. King Chibai fell onto the water surface with his hair disheveled and laughed with his face upturned. Ha ha, I am the strongest man among the younger generation. Zhang Yuochen, do you still have any strength to fight? Zhang Yuochen stared at King Chibai. His eyes filled with complication. There was a trace of firmness in his eyes. He clenched his teeth and unfolded his arms. The spiritual blood inside his body gushed out from the wound. The rich spiritual blood was condensed into the 9-handle blood sword around Zhang Yuochen's body. With the sword tip facing downward and the handle upward, it spun around Zhang Yuochen quickly. King Chibai regarded Zhang Yuochen standing opposite him. His expression changed. He immediately mobilized his genuine chi and displayed a defensive martial technique. Clash! The 9-handle blood swords came together and condensed into a handle. Zhang Yuochen's finger pointed forward. The blood sword was like a beam of blood. It shot out and defeated King Chibai's genuine chi. Puffed. The blood sword penetrated King Chibai's body and propelled hurled him dozens of meters away with its powerful impact. His body hit a large rock on the shore. A loud bang sound let out. King Chibai covered his bleeding abdomen with both of his hands. He fell from the boulder and fainted immediately. No one had expected to see such a twist. It was just breathtaking. And finally, Zhang Yuochen won, especially considering at the last moment when Zhang Yuochen condensed his spiritual blood into the nine-handle blood sword, and only one movement swiftly defeated King Chibai. If he had used this movement at the very beginning, King Chibai would have been defeated long ago. Blood condensed nine swords. Chuobal Insu observed. This blood meridian is rare even since ancient times, and we surely have to admire it. Zhang Yuochen didn't want to show his last card at the very beginning, declared Chen Danzu. But he never thought that King Chibai, who was perfectly open in all his actions, would sneak up on him at the end. So, Zhang Yuochen was actually attacking in anger at the end. He didn't think much of it and applied the movement of nine swords flying together. Right now, no one in Jinfeng Court could remain calm. Everyone was still very excited, especially since Zhang Yuochen's last strike had been just amazing. When the nine swords were shot, who could stop them? Even King Chibai had been defeated. Certainly, Zhang Yuochen deserved to be number one in the Sword Technique Conference. The talent displayed by Zhang Yuochen shocked the 13th Commandery Princess, who had hated him very much before. Now she couldn't utter a word. Zhang Yuochen mobilized his genuine chi and the broken sword inside his body quivered out. A bloody broken sword fell to the ground with a clang. Later, Zhang Yuochen sealed his blood meridians in the wound and swallowed a healing pill. When his condition was stabilized, Zhang Yuochen looked towards King Chibai, who had been carried away by others. He shook his head with a few disappointment in his eyes. Without a word, Zhang Yuochen left Jinfeng Court. Brother Zhang, you can't leave yet. Chen Danzu stepped in front of Zhang Yuochen and glanced in the direction of the 13th Commandery Princess. He murmured, "You are now the best warrior in the Sword Technique Conference. You have to marry the 13th Commandery Princess." Zhang Yuochen said, "I attend the Sword Technique Conference did not for marry the 13th Commandery Princess." Chen Danzu said with a wry smile, "No matter what the reason is, you have become number one in the Sword Technique Conference. If you don't marry the 13th Commandery Princess, it means to show no respect for the royal family of Cayenne Yui Commandery. If the royal family loses face, do you think they will let you go easily? I'm afraid the whole Yunwu Commandery will be diminished overnight, let alone you." Chen Danzu had just finished speaking. Boom! A loud noise broke out in the sky. In the void space 200 meters above the ground, a tactical formation in the shape of a purple line appeared. With the flickering of the purple line, a delicate pavilion emerged from the void space and suspended in the air. It looked like a palace inhabited by fairies. Cayenne's Yui Commandery Prince and 10 powerful ministers in golden robes were all standing on the flying pavilion looking downwards. An ambience of valiant martial arts covered the entire palace. The young genius below had just realized that the great man of Cayenne's Yui Commandery had been watching the Sword Technique Conference. The golden light shining from Cayenne's Yui Commandery Prince gave people a powerful strain. He was in a very good mood and looked at Zhang Yuochen standing down below. The world is full of genius nowadays, which presents a flourishing scene. He began, "Zhang Yuochen, you've defeated King Chibai, the top genius of Cayenne's Yui Commandery. I have great confidence in you. When are you going to marry the 13th Commandery Princess?" A genius like Zhang Yuochen would definitely grow into one of the strongest in the future. Cayenne's Yui Commandery Prince would surely refuse to let him go and definitely wanted to take him as one of his own. Of course, Zhang Yuochen would not marry the 13th Commandery Princess. However, he couldn't say anything like that unless he wished to offend Cayenne's Yui Commandery Prince. If he did, he would harm himself and his family too. Zhang Yuochen stood upright and slightly saluted Cayenne's Yui Commandery Prince, who was standing above with joined hands. He said calmly, "To tell you the truth, there is a small misunderstanding between me and the 13th Commandery Princess in which the princess doesn't like me either. If we get married, I'm afraid that may not be appropriate." Then, Zhang Yuochen continued, "Commandery Prince, since you've been overlooking at the sword technique conference this whole time, you should know that I didn't want to participate in the competition. I was forced to do it. Actually, my purpose of attending this sword technique conference was not to marry the 13th Commandery Princess, but to meet you, Commandery Prince. I was hoping you could send reinforcements and offer help to Yanwu Commandery. If you could assist us, I will be deeply grateful. Hearing this, Minister Ning cried out loud in his mind. This little kid is going to irritate the Commandery Prince. Minister Ning knew better than anyone else that Cayenne Yui Commandery Prince didn't want to know the purpose of Zhang Yuochen attending this sword technique conference. He only wanted Zhang Yuochen to be his son-in-law and draw this top genius into his royal family. For whatever reason, if Zhang Yuochen refused Cayenne Yui Commandery Prince, he would be signing his own death warrant. If you couldn't use a genius for yourself, the best way to deal with it was to kill the genius. Cayenne Yui Commandery Prince was quite calm and showed nothing unusual on his face. I've heard about the difficulty Yanwu Commandery is currently facing from Minister Ning, and I understand your feelings very well, he said with a smile. As long as you marry the 13th Commandery Princess, you will become the Prince Consort of Cayenne Yui Commandery. By then, I'm sure Square Commandery wouldn't dare to attack Yanwu Commandery ever again. What do you think? Although Cayenne Yui Commandery Prince seemed to be very calm, only 10 powerful ministers knew that the prince was giving Zhang Yuochen one last chance to remain alive. Zhang Yuochen certainly knew the consequence of refusing Cayenne Yui Commandery Prince and hence felt tremendous pressure. He could ignore his own life, but he had to consider the lives of his family members. Zhang Yuochen looked in the direction of the 13th Commandery Princess again and shook his head. If he promised to marry the 13th Commandery Princess, it would be against his conscience. Zhang Yuochen had made his decision and was ready to give his answer. Swish! Huang Yanchen flew down from the 3rd floor of Jinfeng Court. Her long sapphire hair fluttered like a waterfall. She had a graceful figure and snow-white skin. She was devastatingly beautiful. She walked towards Zhang Yuochen and smiled at him slightly. Then, Huang Yanchen acknowledged Cayenne Yui Commandery Prince standing above. She said, "Father, actually, the cause of the disaster happening in Yanwu Commandery is because of me. Prince Huoxing of Square Commandery was killed by me, not Zhang Yuochen. So, father, you have to help Yanwu Commandery." Everyone was stunned. A thought came to their minds. Did Commandery Princess Yanjun also have a crush on Zhang Yuochen and want to steal her own sister's prince consort? Commandery Princess Yanjun had always been dominating in anything possible.